Oi, oi, it's your boy, the David Onama of Thanks Obama, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you after UFC on the road, actually trying. Kansas City had a crowd, put on some good fights. Ian Machado Garry versus Carlos Prates. Not bad all round. I'm aware that there was an awesome boxing match on. I have only seen the highlights. I'll be watching the real thing after I've recorded this. MMA first, boxing later. Cake if you're lucky. But I'll talk about that on Wednesday, Thursday Boycast, and I can get nostalgic about how the Ben versus Eubanks were when I was a boy versus how the Ben versus Eubanks are now. Someone asked me about that in my real life, and I said, is it going to be any good? I don't know. You know, they've had so much arsing around over the weight and the eggs and the drugs and the on again, off again. Is it happening? Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn have to pretend that they hate each other again for 10 minutes every 4 years to try and set up something else. But it turned out to be a banger with a load of complications about rehydration clauses and stuff like that. So we'll get plenty to talk about. But today, I want to give Ian Machado Garry his flowers, which basically the theme of this podcast is like, oh, it kind of sucks that he's good, isn't it? He's a sort of annoying man with no charisma who says things like, me versus Bilal, that's the biggest fight in the division. That's the one that'll do blockbuster on the pay-per-view. And you're going, do you know who either of those people you just said are? One of them's you, but nobody cares. Nobody's buying your pay-per-view, mate. It's like when he used to come out and say, the three greatest guys in MMA on the mic are Chael Sonnen, Conor McGregor, and me. You go, what? All you've ever done on the mic is tell me how great you are on the mic? And there's all that stuff with the MMA fan base is brutal about your personal life. They'll the interest in who Alex Pereira was dating and stuff, but everyone likes calling Ian Machado Garry a cuckold. And then he entered to Layla, which on the one hand, his spouse is called Layla. On the other hand, just look at the Wikipedia page for the song before you pick it. Real Reagan entering to Born in the USA kind of shit. But he took on Carlos Prates, and Carlos Prates is a scary mofo. He's been smoking people since he came into the UFC. He's one of the fighting nerds. He's one of the fighting nerds we count, not Bruno Brazil, but the fighting nerds we count, there was something on like a 19-0 win streak at the moment. A lot of that's Caio Borralho, who's done some really great work. But Jean Silva and Carlos Prates have been knocking people out, where Caio Borralho has been proving he's one of the best in the world. And sometimes there's a bit of a difference there, as we talked about on the Boycast. There are people who could absolutely smoke a certain level of fighter, and then when they get into the elite levels, they can't finish them anymore. Or they just look bad. You know, finishing in itself is a skill. Think of someone like MVP. Put him in against scrubs, he's going to knock him out all day. Put him in against anyone who's not a total scrub, and you're getting a decision win or a loss. But some people do it the other way around. Islam Makhachev was not that special coming up, it seemed, in terms of finishing, and now he's finishing everybody. Carlos Prates had smashed Trevin Giles, Charles Radke, Li Jingliang, and Neil Magny on his way up through the rankings. And I think this is a fight I got a pretty good read on. I'm not just going to toot my own horn here because I was talking about how, Anthony Lionheart-Smith, he does curl up in a ball and he is pretty terrible at fighting now, but his opponent's so untested and has only ever gone one round. And he lost to a guy who got into the UFC by faking his record. So maybe the old Lionheart fetal guard will get us through here, and he'll gas in the second round, and then no, he just got murdered. But this one I got a pretty good read on, because I asked for the Trevin Giles game plan without the Trevin Giles chin. I was saying that what I liked about Trevin Giles' performance against Carlos Prates was that he got him into a little bit of a kickboxing match, and Carlos Prates is so in love with Muay Thai, he has it written across his chest. But he's happy to stand there doing cross checks, getting up on one leg, bouncing the lead foot in a full Muay Thai match. And that gives you the opportunity to either set up takedowns on a one-legged man who's standing on one leg, or jump in and throw punches while he's on one leg. And Trevin Giles was very good at getting in with the punches while he was on one leg. Ian Garry here was not stamping on the lead leg like Trevin Giles was, but he was throwing the right high kick all the time. Which keeps Carlos Prates' scary left hand at home, because it's a lot less appetizing to throw a long left straight at someone if there's a good chance they're going to try and dome you with the right high kick at any point. But Prates was picking up his lead leg and going up and cross-checking it taking it on the leg and arms, which is a great way to check kicks, especially if they're good hard kicks. It's the way to check kicks in Muay Thai. I mean, it's the only way to block kicks without getting it scored against you, basically. If you take kicks on the arm in Muay Thai, you're going to get sore for a start, but you're also going to run around the ring going, he's not hitting me, and then at the end they're going to score it against you, and you're going to be like, why? Classic Farang tale there. But yes, go back and watch the number of times that Prachas gets on one leg, and that gave Ian Garry a lot of chances to step down the side and throw the jab. He was stepping outside the lead foot and poking the jab in, which I really liked. Then there was the hand fight, which if you watched, any of Prachas' other fights, but particularly the one with Charles Radke, where he literally grabs his wrist, holds it, goes woo, and then knocks him out, you would think that Carlos Prachas was awesome in the hand fight. And he was terrible in the hand fight here. Ian Garry was doing a fantastic job of just leaving his hand out far enough. He would check Prachas' hand. So he'd have his hand high and open and pointing upwards, and he'd put it over the top of Prachas' hand from the outside. You want outside hand position and top hand position when you're hand fighting like that. We talked about this loads in the Alex Pereira Ankalaev preview, and then it was basically the entire fight, and we talked about it in the aftermath too. But we talked about it in the preview because I did it on the Filthy Casuals guide, how much trouble Pereira had when Israel Adesanya went southpaw and used his lead hand to check Pereira's. And Pereira did exactly what Carlos Prachas did in a lot of these exchanges. He went, I'm losing this hand fight and it's annoying me. I'll drop my hand. And there were a load of times where Prachas drops his hand and just gets jabbed in the face because your hand is supposed to be obstructing their hand as well. There were a couple of times where Prachas was able to actually just drop his hand, come in low, and then throw it up from underneath. Which works, but it's you're leaving yourself wide open when you do it. And of course, Pereira got dropped by Izzy, or got hit by Izzy coming off the fence a few times in the first fight, and actually got knocked out from there in the second fight. But it was mainly the first fight he was getting in trouble for getting frustrated with this hand fight and then dropping his hands. So hand fight was going really well for Garry. He was slapping the hand down, poking the jab over the top. And then if you just watch the fight, it's so lovely to see someone do this, because a lot of stuff like hand fighting and ringcraft, there's techniques, and then there's the sort of psychology where you're just doing tic-tac-toe or rock, paper, scissors, and you're trying to get ahead on what the other guy's thinking and you're trying to trick him. So there's loads of times in this fight where Garry stretches his hand towards Prachas goes to cover it, and Garry pulls his hand back and jabs over the top as Prachas sort of misses with his little parry. Garry had loads of success with the lead hand uppercut, which is always my favourite punch, probably because it's the least seen, and I'm a bit of a hipster, but I just love a really good lead hand uppercut. We were talking about it loads with the George Foreman stuff when I wrote Farewell Big George a few weeks ago, particularly on the tail end of his career. I was just watching highlights from his last fight, and he does it loads, but he throws this lead hand uppercut with his thumb pointing towards himself. Really short punch, and he throws it all the time, and he really rattles big heavyweights with it. But Garry was doing well with it against Prachas covering up and sort of hunching over, and also Prachas would go to a long guard, which is lead hand out straight, and you tuck your chin in behind your shoulder. It's the shoulder roll of Muay Thai, basically. In fact, in boxing, it's called a leverage guard. You put your arm out straight over their shoulder. And it also worked really well because Garry was doing this thing where he'd dip in as if to attack the leg and throw the overhand across the top. And when Prachas covered up and took the right hand on his forearms, he'd sort of crunch forwards, and then Garry would come with the uppercut afterwards. I've heard that called the C-cut combination. I used to call it the C-cut combination. I still do. I'm calling it that now. C-cut combination. The best ever example of it is Matthew Saad Mohammed. Oh, who's he knocking out? I can't remember who it is he does it on, but just look up Matthew Saad Mohammed, Saad, and it'll be the first thing you see in his highlight reel. He throws the overhand on this guy's guard, and then he comes up with the left uppercut from the floor and knocks his head back like a Pez dispenser, which Garry did a couple of times here. This is one of those performances where people talk about levels and stuff, but I think he really made some good reads on the feet, bringing in good tactics for this. And I also think if you looked at their wrestling, Prachas was really good. Every time Ian Garry attempted a takedown and committed to it, Prachas, he rolled him through at one point and ended up on top. And anytime he ended up on the mat, he wasn't there that long. He didn't get beaten up. But Garry was using them in a way where I think he had something like 12, 13 takedowns attempted, but you could see that a lot of them he was just reaching for the leg to get Prachas to go, oh, he's going for my leg. and remember that this guy wants to take you down. Or can. And it's part of his game. Because work attacking the legs, or reaching for his legs, did well to set up the overhand. There were lots of times where Garry came in close, either in a punching exchange or just out from out in the open, ducked his head in and then came up with the right high kick. It was just that multi-dimensional offense where Carlos Prachas was only going to do the one thing. He was going to try and knock out Ian Garry and defend takedowns. Now, the fifth round, Prachas actually got going, which was pretty cool because I thought, if you looked at the stats and if you looked at the fight, he was getting lumped up and outworked at a very good clip. But he really did go back to his corner and they had a good shout at him. And he said, okay, cool, I'm going forwards. He pressured Garry to the fence. He hit him with some nice 1-2s. When Garry went in for takedowns in this fight, he did the head outside single most of the time, but he also went to double legs. But it was always head outside the lead leg, which is important against, well, it's kind of important against southpaws if you're orthodox and orthodox fighters if you're southpaw. But it's very important if you know the guy likes throwing knees, because Carlos Prachas threw a load of knees in this fight. Even if he wasn't reading the takedown and trying to counter with a knee, if someone throws a lot of something, there's a good chance that you'll duck onto it anyway. Or, they're not making the read, but if you do the wrong thing at the wrong time and they're just throwing something up that they do all the time without even caring what you're doing, you don't want to run onto it. Like in this, kind of like how the head kick was working for Garry, if you show it loads, he keeps his left hand at home because he's going to block that kick with the left hand if he can't get his check up in time and so on. But also because if he starts throwing his left straight and you're throwing your right high kick at the same time, it's not even you reacting to him. If you happen to be throwing the right high kick at the same time and you've shown that you do it lots already, and he throws his left hand at the same time, he's getting clattered, even if you haven't made the read. So that's what the takedown stuff was about, keeping his head safe, getting it onto the outside of the body, which is a classic tenet of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. I think that seminar has been scrubbed from the internet, but there's a really good one back in the day. Habib's dad, if you're new here, and Islam Makhachev's coach and Ikram Alascarov's coach for a long time. Basically, everyone from Eagle Team, or whatever they're called. Abdulmanap's the founding father of that, and one of his key things that he taught was if you're going to shoot a takedown against someone who throws knees or uppercuts, or if you're at all worried they're going to throw a knee or uppercut, head on the outside. So that's why his team pick up a lot of head outside singles, which is not super common in high-level wrestling. People tend to turn it into a high crotch. They tend to run up on the other side and try and finish it as a double leg. But Habib's team really like just picking up the single from there. Usman did it a load against Corey Sandhagen. Umar. Usman did it to whoever he was fighting in PFL or Bellator. And then I really liked how Garry was finishing that double leg too, shooting with his head on the outside, snatching up both legs and sitting down and hitting a trip over his other leg. Very sort of weird judo style sacrifice throw component to a double leg. But one of those went wrong in the fifth round and he ended up on the bottom. It kind of confirms what we all knew about Ian Garry, that he is pretty good. It's very good. Being overly critical here of fighters who don't fight the way I like fighters to. And Carlos Prachas, he met some resistance, and he hasn't met with that in a little while. He's been having sort of the time of his life. I mean, Trevin Giles did pretty well against him, actually, then got smoked. In kind of the same sort of way, he was just sort of dropping exchange after exchange. He was getting outworked. He was getting hit with more strikes and not really landing many of his own until he did, and then he knocked Trevin Giles out. But he got 25 minutes to do it here. He almost did it towards the end, but that's not how you want to be fighting. You want to have a bit more of a high output or a higher output. You need to be putting stuff in. The fact that he's a great body hitter he hit a lovely wide left to the body on Garry, I think in the third or fourth, and Garry winced, brought his elbows in and circled off, and then he attempted a little takedown to sort of distract Prachas, and Prachas never went back to it. You'll always see that with body shots. We always talk about look for a fighter's behavior to change, and then they're hurt, because they're very good typically at not showing that they're hurt. But if someone's behavior changes pretty quickly, you know that they've had something go wrong. Prachas' corner should have been screaming for bodywork after that, because he was taking Ian Garry's punches. Ian Garry's not an enormous hitter. He could have taken some risks to land to the body. Didn't need to land the knee to the body, which is the one that he normally favours. But I think the other thing is that he treats that as a knockout shot. He goes for one at a time. He's either going to knock you out with a big kick or punch to the head, or a big knee or kick to the body. And he's not building towards anything. Whereas if someone starts a fight and they throw 5, 6, 7 good body shots, you get into the second, third, fourth round, the other guy's getting tired, and that makes it easier to smash him in the head or knock him out with a body shot. Everything about Prachas' style in the 4 fights he's had in the UFC, or is it 5 now? Hold on. 5, has been sort of looking for big connections rather than winning exchanges, winning points, pulling yourself ahead. And the fighting coach, the Fighting Nerds coach was on the podcast circuit this week, and he was saying to someone that, he studied animals. And the reason that his fighters are such great finishers is that they hunt their opponent. They're not there to have a fight or a sporting contest or whatever. Conveniently forgetting that Caio Borralho doesn't really knock a lot of people out. But to win in a sport, you still have to treat it like a sport. You can't be losing in the course of trying to land your one big shot. So great performance by Ian Garry, and then he immediately tried to do the kneel on the floor and touch foreheads thing, and Carlos Prachas wanted none of it. And he just went, man, everything Ian Garry does outside of fighting, he's such a cornball. Other fights, Ming Yang Zhang smoked Anthony Smith, as we talked about. I'll be honest, there was a couple of cool Anthony Smith moments in this. He hit some lovely folding elbows. He landed about 3 or 4 elbows on the feet. Zhang landed 1 and split him open. And he went, that's unfortunate. But mostly he was just sort of walking forward and getting popped with shots over and over again, looking to land one big one. This is where you end up, Carlos Prachas. Pay attention. If you don't learn to win rounds and exchanges, that's where you end up, walking forward, getting beaten up and going, I'll hit him with one big one later. It'll be fine. But I think the thing that really annoys me about Anthony Smith is that he has better grappling on the mat than most people in the division, but he will only attempt to take down once he's been hurt. So this fight went ages, and then finally he got rattled and he went back to the cage, and then he dived in low for a shot, ended up on his knees. And this is where he ends up in every fight, on his knees, covering up as the opponent sort of tees off on him. And people joke about like the Lionheart guard and how he goes fetal in every fight. But I think it stems from not just having shit takedowns, but attempting shit takedowns at shit times. This guy could be pushing people to the fence and trying to lock his hands, get his knees to the middle, hit the power twist, get behind people, stuff like that. Exactly like David Onama did to Giga Chikadze. But instead he's out there trying to do the thing where he puts both his hands long and he's looping over these weird, awkward shots that don't have the same power they did when he was a bit younger. And he only shoots when he's hurt. And it's like, bro, this guy is completely untested on the mat. He's very clearly a hard-hitting kickboxer. Why are you not, from exchange 1, working your way towards taking him down? Even if you can't take him down, it's a threat that he has to address and worry about, and you may be able to hit him more. But I don't think Anthony Smith cares. I think he's just out there doing whatever to pick up a paycheck. He retired after this. Good. I don't want to sound mean, but it's been 6, 7 years since he was good. And that was largely because his divisions were just sort of washed. He's fighting guys like Shogun and Gustafsson, people who should have been retired a long time before they met him. And they keep giving him analyst jobs. He got a podcast and stuff. And it's just like, what? Well, I know why it happened. It was because he fought John Jones for the title. That's how bad things were at one point. And he got kneed in the head on the ground illegally. And he went, no, it's fine, I'll carry on. And he could have not done that and milked the UFC for all they're worth for the rematch. Been the first person to win a belt by DQ. Aljo didn't win it by DQ, did he? He was defending. Or was he? Or was that fight even for the belt? I can't remember. But anyway. And it happened after this anyway, so it doesn't matter. He would have been the first to win a belt in the UFC by DQ. But he didn't. He did the dumb thing and carried on, and everyone went, what a warrior, blah, blah, blah. And the UFC have sort of treated him as their boy for life now. I will say it would be extremely funny if now that he's out of the UFC and he's out of the testing pool and he's out of the competition, if he just went and appealed the loss to John Jones. If he just wrote to the Nevada State Athletic Commission and was like, I was flagrantly fouled and I needed a point deduction or two or a DQ. Ming Yang Zhang, I'm kind of excited for this guy. I saw him, his last one against Aussie Diaz, he's great fun, but, doing a side kick to open the fight as a light heavyweight always excites me. He doesn't then go back to it. It's kind of like Yan Xiaonan used to do at the start of every fight and then not do anything else like that ever again. But he's got good power. He knocks people out. He had a funny post-fight interview where he said, if you don't know, now you know. To which everyone went, you were the huge favourite. Everyone knew. David Onama versus Giga Chikadze, kind of crap. David Onama he's got the reverse Giga kick. Giga Chikadze's whole thing is entering exchange orthodox, step out the side door into southpaw, the guy follows you, you hit him with the left body kick, and he calls that the Giga kick. David Onama has the opposite thing where he enters an exchange haphazardly from either stance, steps back, straight backwards out of the exchange, changing stances, and gets kicked in the body almost invariably. His last opponent did it like 10 times, and I'm going, that's a terrible thing to have fighting Giga Chikadze. And it happened to loads, but he was using the checks with his shins quite well, which is what you want to see when someone's fighting a big kicker. And then he used the threat of his takedowns and a bit of pressure to run Giga ragged. Got some easy takedowns, made Giga look very bad in the wrestling. Really loved his one in the second round where they just entered an exchange and he ducked out behind Giga, got the back body lock, Giga went to the fence, and he just hit that little trip on the lead leg. You start acting like you're going to drive them down onto their hands, and then you just step around them and sweep their leg out, and they just fall on their butt. That massive roidy heavyweight, who looked great in the fight where he was on roids, got caught, had 2 years off, came back and looked crap. He did that loads in the fight where he was juiced up. He did that loads, and it was great. Was it Hamdi? Is that his name? But Giga Chikadze's like 38 now, isn't he? Oh, 36. He just looks old. David Onama, 30. It's quite interesting because David Onama's getting this reputation as a striker, and to me, he always looks a bit all over the place. He could be better, like if he made better decisions and was a little bit less slapdash with his stance switching, I think he'd be a lot more dangerous. But his real skills are often in the wrestling, particularly along the fence. And he's a Glory MMA guy. He used to train with James Krause. James Krause had a few of these guys who just were very good at this grindy fence wrestling game. And I was talking about this last week. I was saying, I think that's the mark of a really good coach. You can get a load of guys to sort of UFC level, maybe not top of the heap, but they're far too good for the regionals. They're 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 wins, 1 loss in the UFC. But to have a good number of those, that's quite impressive. And James Krause did. And then he blew it all by recognizing the loophole where all your teammates can bet against you if you're injured. Allegedly. But he's not here to defend himself because he's quietly disappeared. If you weren't here for that, that was wild. The guy was bragging about how he was the best betting resource in MMA. He's like, join my Discord, pay for the special membership, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was like, I don't think you should be betting on MMA. You bet on fights that your own fighters are in? I don't think you should be doing that. I think that should be illegal. Abus Magomedov versus Michel Pereira was as bad as everyone expected. Oh my goodness, cut both. Randy Brown versus Nicholas Dalby was great fun, and they got fight of the night for it. Dalby, I think he's 40 now. Yeah, he's 40. Randy Brown's like 8 years younger than him. Randy Brown's like 8 feet taller than him. Randy Brown's got incredible reach and is actually really operating it well in recent years. And Dalby tried to do what he did to the last couple of opponents he's had on his comeback run. He had a first run in the UFC that wasn't very impressive. Went out, had some fights in Cage Warriors, came back in, looked pretty good against a couple of guys. And then he met Gabriel Bonfim, who was undefeated and super hyped, and stopped him. And then he made Rinat Fakhrenadov look terrible in a fight where he was robbed. But man, we were all sort of skeptical over whether just chin down, hard-nosed, get in his face behavior was enough against Randy Brown, and Randy Brown was moving well. He's hitting this beautiful back step into southpaw right hook. He'd start orthodox and he'd back out the exchange that way, and he landed it a good few times, and then the last one slumped Dalby on his face. Ikram Alaskarov got back in the win column, knocking out Andre Muniz. Alice Grove, I thought people would just sort of forget who he was because he lost that fight to Whittaker. Very uncharacteristic Robert Whittaker performance to come out and try and bang you out in the first 2 minutes. But Alice Grove was coming in with some decent hype before he met Whittaker. One loss on his record was to Kamzat. He'd been very good on the regional and Russian scenes. Long-time student of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. Teammate of Islam Habib. I think several times combat Sambo world champion. But his boxing, he's another one of those guys from combat Sambo who does enough to stay off the ground and just boxes people up, kind of like Fedor's game plan was back in the day. And his boxing looked good here. Muniz looked absolutely washed. He looked enormous. I always wonder when anyone who's having a massive drop-off right now, I'm like, wait, so they got rid of drug testing and now you're falling off? Surely you should be extending your career by just taking tons of drugs. But Muniz just, all over the place, started reaching for things. Alice Grove caught him with that punch that Bisping got really good at towards the end of his career. Bisping, for most of his career, was like 1-2s and running around with his chin up in the air and just sort of outpacing people. But after he started working with Perillo, he got a really good jab and got his head offline, got down behind his lead shoulder, and he poked that jab out, and then he threw the big sort of straight-armed swing over the top with his left hand. It wouldn't even cover that much distance, and his arm was straight, but if it caught guys just on the temple or on the chin, it really stunned them. He knocked down Anderson Silva with it. Might have been that. Oh no, he loaded up the left hook against the Rockhold from behind him. It was not the same punch, but he used to do it a lot. And Alice Grove did it here. It's so good if the guy starts reaching for your jab. Works against orthodox fighters too, but he did it against the southpaw here. Just went a little bit high, arced it over the shoulder, chopped it down, turned his head round, knocked him out. Or TKO'd him with ground strikes afterwards. But I do question what Muniz's plan was, because he wasn't like... He probably wasn't going to win the striking because his striking's not very good. But he wasn't pushing the point on a takedown. There was a little bit of clinching earlier in the round, but it was a full 5-minute round, and I don't remember thinking, oh, that was a good attempt at the takedown, or you'll have to do a better attempt to get him down next time. He just sort of ambled around and got hit. Anything else good on this card? Chris Gutierrez? Hell no. Malcolm Wellmaker, he's quite exciting. He sparked some lad on the Contender Series. He's fighting Cameron Simon here, who's pretty good. He got beaten up badly by Peyton Talbot in his last one, which was March 24. And he'd lost to Christian Rodriguez too. So he's now on a 3-fight losing streak. He's a teammate of Drickus, and it was sort of just the two of them representing their team and basically all of South Africa. He has some cool ideas. He does little spinning back kicks, switches stances lots. I think it was the switching stances that got him caught here. But yeah, Wellmaker, very patient, took some low kicks, but kept backing Simon towards the fence, threw a nice body jab, and then he did something that you don't see enough, got the guy to the fence, and then just let him fight his way off. He was like, no, come on, you come back at me. Because a lot of guys, when they get their back put to the fence, everyone feels uncomfortable there, or should. A lot of guys will try and fight their way off by just running at you with punches, and it works a good amount of the time. It shouldn't, but it does. And Wellmaker just pivoted round his lead foot, threw a right hook. It was bizarre because it looked like it hit underneath Simon's chin from 3 o'clock and lifted his head up towards 9 o'clock. So Simon must have had his head sideways or something like that. But man, it was a good punch. Quite excited for this lad, Malcolm Wellmaker. I didn't see him on the Contender Series because I don't watch the Contender Series anymore because it's crap. But I will go back and watch the GIF of that. Damon Blackshear got a sort of workman-like decision over a Latangeli. Timmy Kwamba I thought was pretty cool, or Chwamba. Dude should enter the Chumbawamba. I thought Roberto Ramiro looked pretty good against David Onama, which I rewatched like 2 days before this happened. So I thought, oh yeah, he's a good test for anyone. And they were going pretty evenly. Chwamba looked fast though. I was quite impressed by his speed. He attempted a big intercepting flying knee about a minute before he landed a real flying knee. So maybe a little bit of too excited about big strikes like that, but he'd hurt him before he landed the real flying knee, so that's fine. And then Jocelyn Edwards scored a KO because Jocelyn Edwards is on the warpath and she's going for the title. She's not, but Chelsea Chandler, my God. How are these people still in the UFC? These people, women's bantamweights, not the Chandlers. Her only win in the UFC is over Josiane Nunes, which, you know, we all now know how bad Josiane Nunes is. Just getting smoked by Priscilla Cachoeira. But Man. Jose Nunez came into the UFC, scored an immediate knockout with the overhand left, and everyone went, oh, Lady Tyson's here. She should have retired. She should have just been like, that's it for me. Everyone do the whole what if thing. Because every fight since, she's looked worse. We're keeping that division around basically because people like Norma Dumont. Not the way she fights, we just sort of like her. She's nice. Yeah, that was it for the card. It was fine. It was good, actually. Bits of it were good. I was very impressed by Ian Garry. I was not disappointed with Carlos Prachas. It's always good to see someone have a loss like that and then get the chance to rebuild and work on the stuff that was getting him in trouble. If he doesn't change a thing, he's still going to knock out a lot of mid-tier welterweights and earn a lot of money. But I think that hanging in there like that when you're getting pretty much outclassed for about 23 minutes and then almost finishing it in the last couple of minutes says to me that he can be better. He can be made better. Or there's the chance that he can be made better. He might be not very coachable, but we'll see. I'm your boy Jack Slack. I'll be back midweek to talk about Eubank versus Ben and what's coming up this weekend. And if you want to get in on that stuff and all the extra articles and stuff, sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, be a boy. Johnny Walker attacking Anthony Smith's family. Bless.